JBNN keep you informed. I'm Michelle Jones, and in the news, man killed in Glendavon, St. James. The Montego Hills Police in St. James are investigating the circumstances surrounding the shooting death of a man in Glendavon Tuesday morning. The deceased has been identified as 23-year-old Nicole Dove, otherwise called Coy, a laborer of Bottom Pen in Glendavon. It is reported that shortly after midnight, residents heard gunshots in the area and called the police. Cops conducted a search of the community and discovered Dove lying in blood with multiple gunshot wounds. The scene was processed and the Dove was transported to the Cornwall Regional Hospital where it was pronounced dead. Slain taxi operator identified. A taxi operator was shot and killed by unknown assailants along Kent Avenue in Montego Bay, St. James on Tuesday has been identified. He is 39-year-old Marvin Christie, otherwise called Bolo, of Crawford Street in Mount Salem. It is reported that about 12:30 a.m., Christie and another man were sitting on a wall along the popular tourist hip strip when he was ambushed and shot by men traveling in a motor car. The police were summoned, and upon arrival, Christie was discovered lying in blood with several gunshot wounds. The scene was processed and he was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Man charged after pistol and ammo found in vehicle. A man was charged after a pistol and several rounds of ammunition were found in his vehicle during a police operation on Tuesday. Charged with unauthorized possession of a prohibited weapon and unauthorized possession of ammunition is 31-year-old Kavon Liscombe of Gold Street, Kingston. Reports are that between the hours of 5:30 p.m. and 6:20 p.m., a team of officers were on an operation in the area when they entered the premises and saw Liscombe standing beside a motor car. He was reportedly acting in a manner that aroused their suspicion. The vehicle was searched and one Patriot Beretta 9mm pistol and a Glock magazine containing 7 9mm rounds were found. It was taken into custody. Murdered exscop had no fighting chance. Relatives of murdered ex-policeman Donovan McLean claimed Tuesday that he was like a sitting duck when his licensed farm was taken away from him last year, but that he was fighting to get it back. McLean, who was 33 years old, was among a group of people gambling at a car wash in Caymanas Gardens, Portmore, St. Catherine on Monday night, close to 10:30 p.m., when a motor car drove up and 3 men armed with guns alighted from the vehicle and opened fire in the direction of McLean. He was shot multiple times and later pronounced dead at hospital. At least one other man was shot and injured in the incident. A source has disclosed that the man was out of intensive care at hospital on Tuesday afternoon. McLean's relatives believe that he would have had a fighting chance had his licensed farm been returned to him. They say he was absolved of an alleged incident which occurred at a party during which guns had been fired. It was to get lawyers to represent him to try and get it back, said one relative. How can a member serve the police force for 10 years and you take his weapon? Didn't find anything on it and you didn't reach out to tell him why you're still keeping the weapon. They have his gun for almost a year now. He served the force in a volatile area in Kingston East, the relative said. If he had his weapon, he could have at least fight back. They took it away based on some allegations at a party where they said there were some explosions. They claimed it was him. However, when they made some checks on the scene, the bullets did not match his weapon. There was no witness on the case. Someone even came and made checks and still they didn't give it back to him. The person who came to us said there was nothing to implicate him. No one called him, but he called the police several times to get an update about his weapon, the relative claimed. A close relative said Tuesday that the family is holding on, while another fought tears to express anger, saying they were not happy with how his body was flung in the back of a pickup to be taken to hospital. Security guard gets 18 years in prison for killing common law spouse. A man who pleaded guilty to killing his common law spouse 4 years ago was on Tuesday sentenced to 18 years imprisonment at hard labor when he appeared in the Portland Circuit Court. Elroy Griffiths, a security guard, will be eligible for parole after serving 12 years. Griffiths pleaded guilty on June 21 to the murder of 50-year-old Maureen Johnson. He was also charged with arson, but no evidence was offered. The court heard that on the night of August 20, 2019, Griffiths and Miss Johnson had an argument at their home in Buff Bay, Portland. This later escalated to Griffiths using a knife to cut his spouse's throat. She was also stabbed in the abdomen. Griffiths disposed of the knife in a neighbor's yard and fled the scene. Fire was later seen coming from Miss Johnson's room, which spread to other parts of the house. Her burnt remains were found on the veranda. Griffiths was held by the security forces during a raid in Hope Bay, Portland on January 18 last year after being placed on the police's most wanted list. Fire leaves Trelawney family homeless. A family of 9 is now homeless after a fire destroyed a 4-bedroom dwelling on Newton Street in Falmouth, Trelawney, on Wednesday morning. Jeffrey Scott, who lived at the house, said the fire started about 5 a.m. when his 7-year-old autistic son lit a mattress in a room. "Me outside when me and my sister shout, 'Fire, fire!' We called the fire station but we don't get no answer. When a fire truck from Iron Shore arrived, the building was completely destroyed," a distraught Scott said. Deputy Superintendent at the Falmouth Fire Station, Roland Blissett, confirmed that help to put out the fire came from Iron Shore in neighbouring St. James. "We are having mechanical problems with our unit. Arrangements are in place for Iron Shore to respond in case of fire within Trelawney," informed Blissett. Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie had promised a fire station would be built in Ulster Spring, which is 25 miles from Falmouth. However, the facility is yet to be constructed. Portland woman in Love Triangle found guilty for fatally stabbing German woman 40 times. Portland resident 40-year-old Sharon Campbell is to be sentenced in the Portland Circuit Court on October 27 for the murder of 49-year-old German woman Ute Sotebeer. The deceased woman was stabbed more than 40 times at her home in Park Mount, Portland, on January 14, 2014. Following a trial, which began on June 19 and lasted 12 days, a 7-member jury found Campbell guilty of murder. The Crown led evidence that the motive for the murder was jealousy because Campbell's boyfriend, 38-year-old Tyrone Nugent, was involved in a common-law relationship with the deceased. Evidence was led by Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions, Celine Ogilvie, that Nugent was involved in a relationship with Campbell since 2011, and after he went to live with the deceased, he still maintained an intimate relationship with Campbell. The scientific evidence was that the deceased's blood was found on the blouse which the accused was wearing at the time of the incident. The post-mortem report revealed that death was due to stab wounds to the neck. Campbell had admitted to the police that she was at the scene and the deceased had asked her to leave the premises. She also admitted to the police that the knife which was reported to be the murder weapon belonged to her. In her unsworn statement at the trial, Campbell said it was Nugent who stabbed the deceased. Nugent went home the night and found the deceased covered in blood outside the house. He immediately made a report to the neighbours and the police and assisted the police to find Campbell. Nugent was charged with murder and misprision of felony but was freed after Justice Von Smith upheld a no-case submission made by defence lawyer Carl MacDonald. Attorney at law Michael Jordan represented Campbell. Westmoreland MP says he'll not be pursuing charges over threats. Member of Parliament for Westmoreland Western, Moreland Wilson, says he'll not be pursuing further reporting made to the police of threats made against him recently by members from his constituency. Wilson said initially the threat was taken seriously and a report was made to the police. "I've been speaking with residents from last evening to this morning from the community, and they continue to assure me, as they say in Jamaica, it is just more talk. On that basis, I won't be proceeding with any charges towards the 3 individuals who were identified," Wilson said. Earlier today, reports emerged that the police had taken into custody 2 or 3 men in relation to what they say were serious threats being made and that charges will be laid against the men sometime during the day. The threat was reportedly made against the MP during a boisterous protest by residents within the community of Retreat who were upset about the lack of water in the area for the past 3 weeks. One of the men was picked up at a school on Tuesday, while the other was picked up along the roadway on Wednesday morning. A 3rd man is being sought by the police in connection with the case. "We want to take it seriously because it is a case of a threat that happened on Saturday and some continuous thereafter. So the police have to deal with it in a very serious way, and that is what we're about," assured officer in charge of operation for the Westmoreland Police Division, Deputy Superintendent of Police, Adrian Hamilton. Wilson, in pointing to the dangers of representational politics, gave some insight into the threat made against him. "There are individuals that there would have made threat to life, threat to personal safety, threat to me being the MP, maneuver in this space, that is saying, you cannot come back to Retreat and all of that kind of things," relayed Wilson. While sources have suggested that politics is behind what is happening in the constituency, the police are of the view that Tuesday's protest had nothing to do with the lack of water. Wilson agrees with the police's assessment. He said illegal conduct is at the heart of the problem. "There are several other things happening, and the persons would have been thinking that it is related to the incident on Saturday, and it is not. I've heard of robberies taking place, and the police are currently investigating it. I've heard of persons being intimidated, and this is all part of a lawlessness which ensues, stated Wilson, adding, those absolutely have no relation to the incident on Saturday. Transport Minister outlines implementation of a rural school bus system. Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport, Darrell Valls, has outlined the implementation of a rural school bus transportation system as a major part of his vision for the transformation of the sector. Speaking at a post-cabinet press briefing at Jamaica House Wednesday, Valls informed that a draft terms of reference document has already been established for the implementation of this safe, secure, efficient transport system for rural students, while pointing out that the initiative can be a major driver of behavior change among the students.
Part of that vision is a rural school bus transportation that, as a rural MP, is critical and one of my biggest priorities, and I know that my colleagues on both sides who represent rural constituencies would agree. You're talking about kids that are leaving their homes from at 2 o'clock in the morning to walk for miles to get to the nearest point of where they can get public transport. Then they have to now go through the public transport being disrespected and abused or left because their fare is much less than adults, and then having to mingle with adults in the taxis, which we know what can come out of that. So they then leave school in the afternoon at 2, 3 o'clock after their activities, or 4 o'clock after their after-school activities, and don't get home until 10 o'clock at night. So what kind of learning environment is that for these youngsters, some of who have the most amazing potential and are only doing that because of circumstances of their parents? So I will close with that because I have a draft TOR that I have already established. Implementation of a safe, secure, efficient transport system for rural students. That is a major driver of behavior change among students. It can operate in 2 ways: publicly owned buses as well as franchise services to provide the services. All drivers and conductors thoroughly vetted, trained in youthfully friendly approach, violence prevention, order enforcement to prevent fights and brawls on the buses and in public spaces, a bias towards female drivers and conductors. Pre-recorded and approved audiovisual messaging and music to be played on the bus. This can form part of the resocialization strategy, behavior change modification for the youth, which is so important. All units would be outfitted with electronic access, swipe cards, as this is primarily a safer measure to track the movement of students and to aid the police in investigations in relation to any missing students or road accidents. The student transport pass, a swipe card that will have all pertinent information on a student: name, date of birth, school, home address, and parents or guardians' information. If the school bus requires pay by fare, the said card could be used to pay. Student transport pass could be topped up at each school or online, and all buses should be outfitted with tracking device and cameras on the inside and exterior of the vehicles. The bus should also be available to teachers who could serve as an additional layer of supervision, a protocol developed specifically in consultation with the Jamaica Teachers Association. The rural school bus system will reduce absenteeism and lateness and contribute to reduced truancy. Consultations with the National Secondary Student Council and all other stakeholders. So I close on that good note because I believe that that is a critical part and probably the most important part of the vision that I have for transport, and it is doable. It has been done in other jurisdictions, including Caribbean nation countries, and it is just for us to come up with the will to implement. And that I have, and I know that my government has So the support is there.
JBN, we keep you informed. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, leave us a comment, and click the notification bell to receive our daily news items.